Good afternoon, everyone. This is Enrique Sanchez, founder and director of Spanish United. Tonight, we have a very special guest on the show. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yeah, hi, my name is Dan Kapelovitz, and I'm actually going to take off my glasses. Sorry, I'll start. My name is Dan Kapelovitz, and I'm running for Los Angeles District Attorney.
Welcome. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Yes, as we had spoken when we met at the DA's panel event, which I thought in many cases was a fiasco, but I got to speak with you for a little bit, me and my mom, and from what I've read about you, you're the only candidate that's running as a Green. Am I correct? The Green Party?
Yeah, I'm the only candidate who's a registered Green Party member, and I'm also endorsed by the Green Party, and I'm endorsed by the Peace and Freedom Party.
Oh, awesome. Welcome. So, anyway, one of the questions, I would like to ask you, as you know, the district attorney seat is right now up for grabs, and many of the DAs there are trying to win the votes of the people of the public, and most of them were Democrats, except for one Republican, you that was Green Party, and two other independents. But one of the things that caught my attention is the fact that you were the only candidate that actually believes in restorative justice, because all the other candidates were talking about, let's put more punishment, let's put more injunctions, put enhancements, etc. And then it got to a point where everybody else was throwing personal insults at Mr. Gascon, which is like, it's like, to me, it's like you don't have to agree with him, but making personal shots like that is just very petty, and anger serves no purpose in the civil discourse. So we would like to know, in Spanish United, if you become DA, what would you do differently for the Hispanic community? Because Hispanics are the highest in mass incarcerated group in the country right now, and they have superseded African Americans. So, like, what would you do differently if you were to become the new district attorney of LA?
Okay, well, there's a lot there. Yes, I'm the only criminal defense attorney who's running. And I'm the only one who is actually in the criminal courts every day. And I'm all over the county. I'm not just in one courthouse as some of the DAs are.
Hmm.
And the DAs running, they're not really in the courtrooms, they're more like supervisors.
Hmm.
So as I'm actually, since Gascon's taken office, I believe I'd have to check the statistics, but I believe I've done more trials than all my opponents combined, handled more cases than all my opponents combined. And I've definitely been in more courthouses and courtrooms than all my opponents combined because I really see what's going on. And so my critique of Gascon is actually from, I guess, the left, which is that I like his directives. I might reword them a little bit. And I might add other ones, but he has not been able to implement them because his line deputies have totally ignored him. They act like he doesn't exist. They do whatever they want. They still seek very high punishment. They still seek high bail. They still allege enhancements. They still arrest their own witnesses if they miss court. They still do all these things that are against Gascon's policies. And some of his policies that were good, he's backpedaling on now just for political reasons. They call it a media exception, so if it's a high profile case. But so all the other candidates are more in favor of mass incarceration than Gascon. And I consider Gascon kind of a mass incarceration guy, not because he believes in mass incarceration, but because of the way his office has
Right.
been run.
It's the status
So
quo.
yeah, it's basically just like Jackie. It's not much different than Jackie Lacey. The one good thing he really has stuck to is that he doesn't allege gang allegations, which does affect Hispanic, Latino people, and Black people, of course. 99% of gang enhancements in LA County are alleged against people of color. If a bunch of white people have a gang or something, so-called gang, and commit a crime, they're not considered a gang. It's just a
Right.
group of people,
Right.
a social club.
Right, of
and,
course.
and so that's my critique. So everyone else, to different degrees, I mean, they're relatively liberal people like Chemerinsky, and even Sadal's trying to be kind of, little more liberal DA, but even them, they want to be able to punish people. They want to punish people more than Gascon does.
Mm.
So I'm like the only non-pro mass incarceration uh, candidate in in my opinion.
Mm.
Now, in terms of people of color, yeah, they're disproportionately affected by the criminal legal system. They're stopped more often, disproportionately
Mm.
by police, searched more often, arrested more often, charged with crimes more often, convicted more often. The crimes they're charged with, they're often overcharged, and the sentences they get are higher. And so, um, one of my main platforms is equality. We got to treat all people the same. We should do race blind filings, although it's somewhat difficult because some things like names are pretty obvious, even if you
Right.
don't know the race and things like that. And also, I'm totally in favor of not, or let's say, getting the result that has the least amount of immigration consequences if someone has immigration issues.
Mm.
And so Gascon, they say they do, but when you're in court every day, and sometimes they'll work with you. By law, they have to consider it. But I've had one deputy DA said to me, "Well, I considered it, and I think your client should get deported." Like, so they didn't really consider it. And sometimes they actually have to take a kind of a worse sentence because immigration law is so crazy that it can actually be better for immigration purposes. For instance, burglary, which is much more serious than, say, grand
Anything.
theft, because it's like going into a house, but because it could theoretically be going into a house to, say, commit vandalism, it's not considered a theft crime. So therefore, it's not considered as much moral turpitude as, say, just going into a store and stealing something.
Right.
So it's not necessarily we're trying to get people, like, let them get off because of immigration consequences. You just, because immigration law is so crazy, that it just, there's so many different things you got to think about.
Right. Yeah, because right now with the current climate, Hispanic people are falling through the cracks the most, especially when it comes to immigration. Like I started Spanish United 4 years ago primarily because Hispanic people are the only ethnicity that don't have what I would say minority protections. Like technically on the books, everyone's protected under civil rights, but there are certain groups of people that are more protected. Hispanic people don't fall under that because Hispanics, we're not a race, we're an ethnicity. So Hispanic could be of any race. They could be Caucasian, African, Native American, Asian, etc., or a mixture of all those. So it's like there's no uh box that we fit in. And every time a Hispanic person gets convicted or gets screwed over by the system, it kind of causes a lot of problems. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is that there needs to be fairness when it comes to justice. Like justice is supposed to be blind, but I feel that it's become more politicized depending not only on your affiliation but also on your ideology as well in addition to ethnicity and racial background. So, Spanish United has done many cases where I have spoken and represented a few fruit vendors that have been with issues with being harassed. Like a couple of years ago, there was a fruit vendor over in Santa Clarita that was being harassed by some racist people. And the funny thing is that the fruit vendor was not anywhere near this person's business. So these people actually drove like a few miles just to mess with that person. So, I did a lot of boycotting to get these people out of business because that type of behavior is not acceptable in civil society. It's like, again, one could have an opinion about someone. You don't have to be friends with someone, but to try to harass them and accost them and demonize them or to humiliate them, that's where the boundary needs to be drawn. So that's what we do in Spanish United. Like we have done a lot of petitions where we try to help Hispanic people get representation. Like we are not a legal firm, but we do referrals for those that need it. And I think it's very important that Hispanic people know their rights. Because when many Hispanic people go into the legal system, many of them are completely oblivious on how the justice system works, and many of them think by taking a plea deal is going to serve their best interest, but in reality, it doesn't. Many of them take it because number one, they will avoid going to jail in most cases, and second, that many of them cannot afford to post bail. So that is a concern that we have because it's like too many Hispanic people have had the books thrown at them primarily because of prejudicial city attorneys in particular. A lot of people don't realize that the prosecutor holds more power, even more than the judge. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh yeah, well definitely. I mean, the prosecutor, you're kind of at the mercy of the prosecutor if you're trying to work out a deal. I mean, you can do certain motions where it's up to the judge. If a motion to dismiss because there's insufficient evidence or an illegal search, then that would be up to the judge. But if you're just talking about pleading out, 90% of cases plead out, and then it's basically you're talking to the prosecutor trying to get the best deal. Now the judge can kind of lean on them and say, come on, this case is worth this or whatever. And another way judges do have power, like you said, with bail, because I mean, it's getting a little bit better now, but you don't know, with misdemeanor cases, often the defendant cannot afford bail.
Mhm.
And they'll say, oh, it's because we're not going to let them out on their own recognizance or lower bail they could pay because they're a danger to the community. And these people are presumed innocent. They've never been convicted.
Right.
But then they say they're a danger to the community, but then at the same time, then they'll offer them time served as long as they plead guilty. So all of a sudden, they're not a danger to the community because they're saying they can get out of jail as long as they get their conviction. So it's totally ridiculous. Most people do come back to court. They're not flight risks. Uh, so the bail system, I think unless there's like a hearing where there's actual clear and convincing evidence that someone is really a total danger to the community, people should be released on their own recognizance. Now, if they miss court a million times, of course, then maybe have bail. But so that's just it's two-tier system because when I go to court, often the first thing that the deputy district attorney will ask me is your guy in or out? Because if they're out, they're going to get a better offer. Because, well, one reason is because most people, no one wants to take a deal where they're going to go into jail or prison. It's very hard to convince someone to go into prison when they're not in prison. Now, if they're already in jail, then they can just delay the case, and then
Right.
by the time they have the case done, they already have a lot of time in jail. So they might say, okay, I'll take a deal because I'll get out. I'll take low term, I'll get out soon. So they're basically coerced to take a deal because they can't afford bail. So it's a
Right.
two-tier system.
Yes, and I feel that it's counterproductive and it serves no purpose. It's like we're spending too much money building prisons than we are schools and we are hospitals. And how does that benefit society? It doesn't. And I feel that, you know, low level offenders, especially if they're not violent, there should be like a form of rehabilitation because that's one thing that I noticed when I was there at the DA panels that they were all focusing on punishment and has more punishment, and not one single candidate mentioned about okay, the ones that are punished are punished, but we need to find alternatives for low level offenders for rehabilitation because I feel that rehabilitation is important. There's consequences when people commit a crime, that's plain and simple, but there's no options for rehabilitation. That's why so many people end up in the system becoming a revolving door because it's like they go in, they go out, they go in, they go out, and then even if they're trying to go straight, it's like I already have a record, no one's gonna hire me, no one wants nothing to do with me. So what are they gonna do? They're gonna go back doing the same thing again. So it becomes a vicious cycle. So I feel that there needs to be focus on rehabilitation because again, um, the United States only represents 5% of the world's population, but yet we hold about 25% of the world's incarcerated people. And even communist China, which a lot of conservatives like to say is oppressive, they have less people incarcerated than we do here. Like we have more people in jail in the United States and America, which is a democratic society, while China has less. So it's like we need to reverse this trend because it hurts a lot of people. It takes away the breadwinners from families. It destroys societies, and it just costs taxpayer money. So there needs to be something that has to be done for restorative justice because no one's winning. It's just private entities that are profiting off the misery of others.
Right. And it's not just the fact that China is their government. They have about 1 billion people, and we have about 300 so million people.
Right.
Yet, even in sheer numbers, we have more people in prison, not even per capita. We have more people than China, and they have about 3 times the population. It's
Mm-hmm.
outrageous. And so, yeah, I agree. Of course, sending someone to prison, that's not going to make them better usually.
No.
It's so for instance, I've had the last year I've had these outrageous uh cases with the district attorney's office. And that's what finally motivated me to run because everyone's like saying, "Oh, Gascon's so soft on crime," but if you're actually in the courtrooms, they're very harsh on crime. For
Oh
instance, I had a
yes.
case where the guy is, I think, like 18 years old. He should have got mental health diversion. He had mental health issues, he was evaluated. The judge even said she was going to give it. And then the DA engaged in this totally unethical
Mm-hmm.
judge shopping, kept pushing it back, claiming they weren't ready until we finally got sent to another judge who denied it. So now this guy is going to go to prison for 2 years and he's not going to be better. He's not going to help his mental health and he's going to be worse. So are you really trying to prevent crime or are you just trying to have a revolving door? So that's what I'm saying. I mean, even now, people say he's too soft on crime. They fight these diversion motions tooth and nail. A drug diversion, same thing. A case, this guy was a perfect candidate for drug diversion, mental health diversion, and they just fight against it. They're like, no, no. And it's just crazy because that's what we need. And we do need more funding. Everybody sort of agrees on this is there aren't enough beds for like drug treatment programs or mental health treatment programs. It's unfortunate. We need to spend money, like you said, on these kind of diversion programs, make actually prevent crime. And like you said, if you send someone to prison, it's like a breadwinner, and then they're maybe resort to crime because they don't have any money, um, or just they're not gonna spend decades without like usually a father. It's usually a
Mm-hmm.
men go to prison more often and then the cycle continues.
Right.
And it's just we want to prevent crime. We don't want to just throw people in prison forever.
Right, and unfortunately, the reason why there's so many Hispanic youth that end up joining gangs or getting into trouble is because the breadwinner is usually the Hispanic male is the one that gets sent to prison, and then unfortunately the mother is not able to work, or even if she does work, they're not home. You take away two parents from the household. One is sent away, and the other one has to work because they have to survive. And when there's no supervision, that's where it creates problems. And one of the things that we're doing in Spanish Unite is that we're trying to eventually set up a community center, especially in at-risk areas where there's Hispanic people, because I have noticed that in places that tend to be more wealthy or you have a different ethnicity, like for example, the Armenians, the Jewish community, the Persians, the Chinese. What I saw that they have in common is that they have not only schools for their people, but they also have community centers that provide services for their people. And every time I've done intakes with many Hispanic people, let's say from Bellflower, Boyle Heights, Hawaiian Gardens, Norwalk. They all tell me we don't have community centers in our community like we used to. Like we used to have Boys and Girls Club. We used to have these types of places, but they cut off funding. And those, because I'm from that era of Dare and the Boys and Girls Club. I'm gonna be 41 this year, and I grew up in an era where, hey, that saved a lot of lives. I was never involved in any type of crime, thank God. I always lived in good areas, but I feel that these community senators, especially for the young people, can serve so much hope because not only they could keep themselves out of trouble, but at the same time they could learn important skills. They could take SAT scores. There needs to be investment, and that's something that I'm seeing in the Hispanic community, that there's a lack of investment. And I feel that if you invest in the people, that's going to cause the people to invest back in the community, like you see with the Chinese, with the Jewish community, with the Persians, etc. It's like there needs to be investment. It's like, we need to stop thinking that's a waste of money, it's a waste of time. We should always see every individual as an investment. I know that you're Jewish like I am. The blessed memory of the Chabad Rebbe said that there's no such thing as a small Jew, but every Jew has a purpose. And I feel that's a very important concept of Tikkun Olam, which is to repair the world and to make society a better place.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I agree with everything you've been saying. Yeah, we need to invest, like you said, in reaching kids because you want to prevent them from getting into criminal activity. Most people they join gangs when they're like 13 years old just for protection in school. I mean, it's not like they want to commit crimes. It's
Oh, of
just
course not.
it's just a situation. For they do it just because they have to sometimes,
Of
and so
course.
it's we really do need to do anything we can to reach people before they even get in trouble. And I totally agree with you. And these DAs, they just, for one thing, they spent I mean, this isn't that much money, but in the whole scheme of things, but they spent like millions of dollars on this absurd recall that could have gone to helping preventing crime.
Hmm.
They're suing the county. They're suing Gascon. The money doesn't come out of his pocket. It comes out of the county's
Taxpayers.
pocket. The taxpayers, exactly. They want us to pay them millions of dollars because they're unhappy with their boss. I mean, I've had real jobs. If I didn't do what my boss told me to do, I'd be fired that instant.
Right.
But they have these protections. And oh, just going back to what you were talking about a long time ago, the vendors. Are you familiar with this the Justice 8 case?
Yes, I am. I'm familiar with them.
Okay, so they're like these activists that were there are people harassing street vendors, and they were sort of calling them to task, and they're being held without bail, which is absurd. They're not even charged with very serious crimes. With the allegations aren't very serious, and they're being held without bail. It's totally unconstitutional. It is in LA County. I mean, LA County actually is probably one of the better counties. Uh, than the surrounding ones in Orange County or San Bernardino or Riverside,
Ventura County.
Ventura. Yeah, exactly. So they say Ventura, was it come on vacation, leave on probation. So
Hmm.
it's
That's what
not as
happened.
bad
That's
as
what happened
LA.
to Rodney King.
Right.
He was
Yeah.
actually
So
tried
LA
there in
County.
Ventura County.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. So LA County, well, the other weird thing is every courthouse has a different culture. And so when I'm DA, I'm going to make sure we treat people the same. Um, so for instance, San Fernando, in my mind, is a totally rogue court. They are out of control. The
I'm very
DAs are out.
familiar with them. Very
You're
familiar.
very familiar with them, yeah.
Yes, there was a case of an individual who was he was accused of a crime that there wasn't even any merit. It's like there was this woman that was stalking him, and then before he was able to put a restraining order on him, she did it to him, and then he got a bogus charge saying that a criminal complaint was made against them that had to do with posting personal ID information, which it didn't even make any sense. And then when he went to court, it's like he was gonna plead not guilty, go to trial because it's like there was no evidence. And then I witnessed that the city attorney there, oh my gosh, he wanted to fry this poor guy, and by the grace of God, he didn't go to jail, but his record was screwed up for 3 years. Luckily, he was able to sponge his record, but it's like the San Fernando Superior Court, in my view, is the most corrupt court in the country and probably in the entire state because they treat people very horribly in that court.
Yeah, it's outrageous there. I can tell you a bunch of stories. They allege strikes that don't even exist. I had a case, the guy didn't even have a strike. They allege a strike. It raised the person's bail, because if you have a strike prior, it adds a lot of money to your bail. I kept showing them over and over again he didn't have a strike. They still wouldn't strike to strike, and we finally settled it where he didn't get this prior strike. But it's just like they could never even admit they're wrong. I had another one where they said my client had a pending felony, It wasn't true. The case had been already settled for a misdemeanor, and it wasn't even a misdemeanor. It was drug diversion. He was about to get the case dismissed, and that too raised the bell. Luckily, the judge granted him OR in that case. I had a case where the appellate court said that this judge and this deputy district attorney violated the due process rights of my client,
Mhm.
and I got appointed after the fact. And just for repeating what the appellate court said that they had violated my client's due process rights, they spent 2 hours screaming at me. And the DA and this judge, they're buddies from when the judge was a DA. This is probably the most evil judge in the
Mhm.
county. I can't believe he's still on the bench. He does another thing where he's the only judge I've had where somebody goes to court over and over again. They're on time. They never miss a court date. Then they have the preliminary hearing, and then he holds them to answer, which happens 99% of the time. It's not really any change in circumstance. In fact, it's even less than when they first set bail, they just assume by law, they assume the facts of the police report are true.
Right.
So this is even a lower standard. And he raises the bail. And so I had this guy, he paid bail, he's out on bail, went to court every time. And because he's held to answer, which happens every single time, it's not like it
Right.
was a surprise, he threw him in jail. It was outrageous. And then when we bailed him out, we helped him get out, and then went to trial, got an acquittal. So this judge is just pure evil. I don't know why the PD's office hasn't just filed like 170.6 affidavits, which means they can get rid of one judge. I can't believe he hasn't been ousted from criminal court.
Mm.
It's just outrageous. I thought about running against him as judge, but the thing is, even if I beat him, they can still put him in another courthouse, so
Wow.
it wouldn't do any good.
Yeah, I know how that is. It's like once they're grafted in, it's like it doesn't matter what they do unless they kill somebody or molest a kid. It's like, they're there for life. So that's also, there needs to be term limits when it comes to judges as well, and even people that work in, for public safety, because it's like it's affecting everybody. It's like it just serves no purpose. Another question I
And I
wanted
asked,
to, yeah, go
oh,
ahead. I'm
sorry.
sorry. No,
I was gonna say,
sure.
I asked the public defender there, I go, why don't you guys paper? It's called papering a judge. Why don't you paper this judge? And like, well, yeah, where are we going to go? So it's kind of like with baseball, when you have like a really good hitter
Hmm.
and they would walk them every time, but the next hitter will also hit home runs.
Hmm.
So so they're kind of protected by other bad judges. So you want to get rid of this judge, you're just going to be sent to another bad judge. I mean,
Right.
I paper that judge every time because I think he's the worst, but I guess the PD's office thinks there's even worse judges there. So it's out of control there. I'm sure Gascon has never been inside that courthouse. He definitely has no idea what's going on in there. It's
Probably not.
it's out of control.
Probably not. And another thing I was gonna ask you, because we have a little bit of time left, if you become elected as DA, what would you do differently in the
Okay,
in the in the city? I'm trying to push the time in. So what would you do
that's okay.
differently?
I'd love to come back too. The first thing I would do, the second I'm elected, I'm going to hire the best and brightest attorneys out there. I know tons of attorneys. I'm going to go to the law schools. I'm going to recruit people. Right now, there's almost a fourth of the attorneys that we could have are vacant. These positions are vacant. There's about 200 positions. We could hire these attorneys instantly. Morale is way down. They don't like Gascon, most of the deputy district attorneys, but the people I hired would be pro-justice attorneys. I'd be hiring them based on them wanting to really seek restorative justice, rehabilitation, crime prevention, equality, and mass incarceration. So they're already going to have that. They're not going to rebel against me. I'm also going to work with the current ones. I I probably know more deputy district attorneys than Gascon does because I'm in courts every day.
Hmm.
I'm working with them. Most people are good people. It's like they're not evil people,
Hmm.
and a lot of them are reasonable. There are some crazy ones, just like they're
Hmm.
crazy defense attorneys and crazy judges, and they're good ones. And so I would work with them. I would talk to everybody ahead of time. That's what Gascon did. He didn't talk to anybody. He just came in day one, put these directives on, which I think are pretty much great. They're based on the facts and the evidence and the science. But he just laid them down and freaked everyone out. I mean, I would talk to people ahead of time. Right now, I'll talk to anybody in the DA's office and tell them what I want to do, and I'll listen to any ideas too. I don't care where they come from. If a good idea is a good idea, so I would never retaliate against anybody. Uh, I'm a good boss. I work well with people. So that's what I do different. I sort of enact the reforms that haven't been enacted yet.
Awesome. That's awesome. I really wish you well on your endeavors, and I wish that you do well in your campaign. So we've come to the end of our time. I wanted to tell you thank you so much for being on the show, and for your listeners on your end. Anyone that wants to reach out to us, we are available on all social media platforms. We are on Facebook, on YouTube, Twitter, known as X, Instagram. Anyone wants to donate to Spanish United, you're free to do so. It's not obligatory, and we'll definitely keep in touch. And as soon as I finish, I will email you and inbox you the link that you could share the podcast whoever you want to share it with.
Yeah, I'll definitely share it. And please come to my website, www.kapelovitz.com. And I'm on Twitter, and I'm all over. But yeah, and thank you so much for having me. You basically said my platform for me. So um so thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Have yourself a good evening.
All right, you too. And let's talk after.
Oh, definitely. Sure, definitely.
Okay. All right. All right, thanks a lot.